My name's Evan, and I'm 29. For most of my life, I thought family meant unconditional love, the kind where you show up for each other, no questions asked. I held on to that belief through every petty insult, every overlooked achievement, every time my brother, Josh, made sure I knew I was the outsider. Growing up, it was small things. Him getting the new bike while I got the hand-me-down, him throwing a tantrum until he got the bigger bedroom, him being celebrated while I was the afterthought. I told myself it didn't matter, that one day we'd be adults and it would all even out. That family would finally feel like family. I held on to that hope way longer than I should have. When I landed my first real job out of college, a tough, competitive position in a new city, I excitedly texted my family. Josh's reply was a gif of someone slow clapping sarcastically. My mom said she was so proud, but then asked if I could help Josh with his rent since he was going through a hard time. It was always the same dance. Josh would stumble, and I'd be expected to catch him. Never mind that he was older. Never mind that he'd had every advantage I didn't. Somewhere along the line, it became a family joke that I was the responsible one, the backup plan. I laughed along sometimes, just to belong. But a part of me kept a tally, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. Thanksgiving had always been our big gathering. No matter where life took us, everyone was expected to show up at my parents' house, sit around the overstuffed table, and pretend everything was perfect. Last year was different, though. Last year, I had started to see things a little more clearly. I'd spent the year working brutal hours, saving up for a down payment on my first home. Meanwhile, Josh had bounced between jobs, borrowed thousands from my parents, and somehow still managed to post pictures from expensive concerts and beach trips. Every time I visited home, the tension felt thicker. My mom would pull me aside and gently hint that Josh was just struggling right now. My dad would grumble about how family supports family, casting long looks at me over his beer. I knew what they meant. They wanted me to hand over more money. Again, quietly, without making it awkward. I told myself I could get through Thanksgiving if I just kept my head down. Smile, nod, survive. That was the plan. I even convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. Maybe they'd finally see me as more than a wallet with a heartbeat. I showed up with a homemade dessert, trying to force myself into the holiday spirit. The house was packed. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, old family friends. It was one of those loud, chaotic Thanksgivings where the smell of turkey and too many perfumes swirl together, and kids are screaming somewhere in the background. I tried to blend in, carving out a quiet corner of the couch, sipping my drink, listening. It didn't take long for the usual patterns to emerge. Josh, of course, was holding court at the center of everything, telling exaggerated stories about his latest business ventures and making everyone laugh with jokes at my expense. I was used to that, the little jabs about how Evan probably has a spreadsheet for his social life, or how Evan's idea of fun is reading tax codes. I smiled tightly. Whatever. It wasn't new. Dinner was worse. Somehow, the seating arrangement had me squeezed at the very end of the table, half balanced on a folding chair while Josh was seated right next to Dad at the head. They toasted Josh's entrepreneurial spirit, while conveniently forgetting that his so-called ventures had been funded by constant bailouts. I kept smiling. I focused on my plate. I told myself not to cause a scene. Then came dessert. Someone refilled everyone's glasses, and my dad raised his to say something heartfelt about gratitude. I leaned back, ready to disappear into the wallpaper. That's when Josh stood up, glass raised high, swaying a little from all the drinks. "Here's to family," he said loudly, grinning. Except Evan, of course. The whole table burst out laughing. Even my mother, who at least used to fake discomfort at these things, chuckled behind her napkin. I sat there, staring at my half-eaten slice of pie, feeling something inside me go very, very still. For a split second, I thought about laughing along. That old instinct. Make it easy for everyone. Be a good sport. Don't make it awkward. Instead, I set my fork down gently, wiped my mouth with my napkin, and smiled. "Good thing I planned ahead," I said, my voice even and pleasant. I reached down beside my chair and pulled out the envelope I tucked into my jacket pocket before leaving home. I didn't slam it on the table or throw a tantrum. I simply set it down in front of Josh, right between his glass and his half-eaten slice of pecan pie. The laughter faltered. Josh blinked down at the envelope, confused, the bravado slipping from his face. He looked up at me, smirking weakly like he thought it was a joke. "What's this?" he snickered. "It's a notice," I said. He snorted and tore the envelope open, still trying to play to the room. Still trying to keep the joke alive. I watched his face change. First confusion, then a flicker of worry, then pure, stark white panic. The room, once filled with easy laughter and clinking glasses, went dead silent. Every pair of eyes locked onto Josh as he stared at the paper in his hands, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. My dad leaned forward, frowning. My mom set down her glass a little too hard. Somewhere in the background, someone dropped a spoon. Josh finally looked up at me, his face drained of color. You can't be serious, he stammered. I just smiled, slow and calm, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying for years. I didn't say another word. Not yet. I let the silence stretch, thick and uncomfortable, the whole room practically vibrating with tension. I wanted them to feel it. Really feel it. Because for once, I wasn't going to smooth things over. I wasn't going to rescue Josh. I wasn't going to make it easy for anyone. Josh's hand trembled slightly as he set the paper down, but he couldn't seem to tear his eyes away from it. His lips were moving, but no sound was coming out, like he was trying to summon the swagger he always leaned on, the easy jokes, the cocky grin, but it had deserted him. Good. I wanted him to sit in that helplessness for a minute. I wanted every fake laugh, every eye roll, every offhand comment about how I was just the responsible one to echo back at him now, in front of the whole family. My mom was the first to crack. She reached across the table, snatching up the paper with quick, jerky movements. Her eyes scanned it rapidly, and I watched the blood drain from her face just like it had from Josh's. "Evan," she said in a strangled voice. What? What is this?" I took my time. I picked up my glass, took a small sip, and set it down carefully. Then I met her eyes. "It's a notice of lien removal," I said calmly. "Filed this morning." The room stayed frozen, like the house itself was holding its breath. My dad leaned forward now, his forehead wrinkled. "Lien? On what?" I turned to him, smiling pleasantly. "On Josh's truck, on his apartment, and on the business account you co-signed for him last year. All the things I personally guaranteed so he could keep pretending he was a big shot." I paused to let that sink in. Several of my cousins were staring openly now, forks halfway to their mouths, forgotten. "You co-signed for me?" Josh croaked, voice thin and high-pitched. I tilted my head slightly. "You didn't know?" Mom and Dad needed someone with good credit. Yours wasn't exactly an option. A soft, shocked noise rippled around the table. Josh was shaking his head frantically now. But, you said you were helping. You said." "I was helping," I cut in, my voice still pleasant, almost pitying. "Until you decided to humiliate me. Again. Publicly. After everything." I let that hang in the air for a beat longer. "See," I continued, still smiling like we were discussing the weather, "the thing about liens is, they come with strings. When I withdrew my guarantee this morning, those strings snapped." "Which means your truck." I gestured casually. "The one you're still paying off? That lender's going to want their collateral back. Probably by Monday." "And your apartment lease?" "Well, without me co-signing, that back rent you've been ignoring, that's going to be a problem. A pretty immediate one." Josh's mouth was opening and closing like he couldn't decide whether to scream or cry. "Maybe both." "And the business account?" I added thoughtfully. "The one you use to rent office space and buy all that fancy equipment? Without my guarantee, it's frozen pending review. Creditors will come knocking soon. Probably before dessert." The silence that followed was dense and suffocating. Finally, my dad barked out, "You can't do this to your own brother." I leaned back, folding my arms. I didn't do anything to him. I just stopped doing things for him. There it was. The truth, finally spoken aloud. Josh pushed back from the table so hard that his chair screeched against the hardwood floor. He stumbled to his feet, his face twisted in rage and panic. "You're ruining my life," he shouted, voice cracking. I raised an eyebrow. "Funny. You never seemed to think I was part of your life unless you needed a bailout." That hit harder than I expected. For a moment, Josh looked like a little boy again, the kind who used to shove me down and laugh when I cried. Only now there was no one laughing, no one backing him up. Even my mom stayed silent, her mouth a tight, pale line. Josh's gaze darted around the room, desperate for support, but found none. The cousins who used to laugh at his jokes were staring at their plates. The aunts and uncles were suddenly very interested in refilling their drinks. Even Dad looked uncomfortable, though whether it was guilt or just anger that his golden boy had stumbled, I couldn't tell. Josh turned back to me, his face crumpling into something almost pitiful. You can't just leave me hanging," he choked out. "You have to help me fix this." I picked up my glass again, swirling the dark liquid idly. "I don't have to do anything, Josh," I said softly. Not anymore. And with that, I stood up. I tucked my chair back under the table neatly, like nothing at all was wrong. I glanced around the room, at all the shocked faces, the awkward silence, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt free. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the dining room, my footsteps echoing in the stunned quiet. Behind me, I heard Josh slump back into his chair with a broken sound, like the air had been knocked out of him. I heard my mother start to whisper shout at my father. I heard forks clinking awkwardly against plates as people pretended they weren't part of a complete implosion. I stepped out onto the front porch, the cold November air biting at my cheeks, and closed the door behind me with a soft click. I stood there on the porch for a moment, breathing in the crisp air, letting it settle inside me like armor. The muffled sounds of chaos seeped through the closed door behind me, frantic voices, the scrape of chairs, hurried footsteps. Good. Let them scramble. Let them feel even a fraction of the helplessness they had forced me to swallow all these years. I wasn't the responsible one anymore. I wasn't the backup plan. I was done patching holes in a sinking ship while they laughed and kept drilling more. I walked down the front steps slowly, savoring each one. My car was parked at the curb, packed and ready. I had already known how tonight would go, no matter how much I tried to lie to myself. I had planned for this moment like I planned for everything, carefully, quietly, and completely. When I slid behind the wheel, my phone buzzed violently against the console. I glanced at it, 26 missed calls. Mostly from my mom and dad. A few from Josh. Some from random cousins who probably had no idea what they were supposed to do, pick a side, stay out of it. Beg me to fix it quietly before the neighbors noticed. I turned the ringer off and set the phone face down. I wasn't interested in hearing excuses. I wasn't interested in hearing how it's not that deep, or family fights sometimes, or he didn't mean it. They always said that. Every time Josh crossed a line, every time he humiliated me, every time he made it clear I was only valued for what I could do, not who I was. And every time, I was expected to forgive, to forget, to smile through it because that's just Josh. Not anymore. I started the car, the low rumble of the engine grounding me. I pulled away from the curb, not fast, not dramatically, just steady. Sure, I didn't need a big exit. The real explosion was still happening inside that house. I drove through town, past the familiar streets lined with old oaks and sagging porches wrapped in Christmas lights already. Places where I used to walk as a kid, clutching report cards they barely glanced at, dreaming about the day they'd finally notice me. I smiled to myself, but it wasn't a bitter smile. It was something quieter, stronger. They had noticed me now. About 20 minutes out of town, I pulled into a little gas station and parked under the buzzing fluorescent lights. I needed to check something before I went any further. I grabbed my laptop from the passenger seat, opened it on my lap, and tethered it to my phone. The connection was slow, but it didn't matter. I wasn't in a rush. I had all the time in the world now. I logged into the financial portal that handled the liens, the guarantees, the legal notices. I scrolled through the records slowly, savoring every word. Notice delivered. Account frozen. Repossession proceedings initiated. Everything was falling exactly into place. Josh would lose the truck first, probably before Monday, like I said. Then the apartment. Eviction notices were brutal this time of year. The business account would be seized before he could even blink. The equipment he liked to show off, the fancy monitors, the drone cameras, the espresso machine he bragged about, all of it would be gone within weeks. No more pretending to be an entrepreneur. No more living large on my sacrifices. I closed the laptop with a satisfying click and leaned back against the seat, staring up at the buzzing lights. I wasn't naive. I knew they'd come after me next, with guilt, with pleas, maybe even with threats. My parents would probably call it a misunderstanding. They'd demand I fix it, sweep it under the rug again, because that was the way things were supposed to work. Josh screwed up. I saved him. The sun rose, the sun set. Not anymore. Because I had planned for that too. Earlier that week, I had contacted a lawyer, one of the best in the state. I paid for an airtight letter to be drafted and mailed to every member of my immediate family. It outlined, in simple, brutal language, that I was severing all financial ties effective immediately, that any attempt to contact me regarding money would result in legal action, that all previous loans, gifts, and informal agreements were null and void. They couldn't guilt-trip me. They couldn't shame me. They couldn't trap me. I was free. As I sat there under the humming lights, I really realized, that I wasn't running away from them. I was running towards something. Toward peace. toward a life where my worth wasn't measured in how much I could give and how little I could ask for, toward people who valued me not for what I could do for them, but for who I was. The gas station attendant gave me a suspicious look as I sat there smiling like a lunatic, but I didn't care. I grabbed a soda from the mini-mart, tipped him way too much just because I could, and hit the road again. Miles slipped away under my tires, and with them, years of resentment, of loneliness, of biting my tongue until it bled. It felt good. It felt right. The phone buzzed again once, twice, then a third time, but I didn't bother looking. I knew exactly what those texts would say. Please just come back inside. We can talk about this. You're being dramatic, Evan. Fix this. You're ruining Thanksgiving. But they were wrong. I didn't ruin Thanksgiving. They did. They just finally had to sit with the wreckage they'd built themselves, without me there to clean it up. I kept driving until the town disappeared behind me, swallowed up by fields and forests in the dark November sky. I didn't have a final destination yet, just a hotel booked a few hours away, a few job interviews lined up in new cities. A whole new life unfolding, slow and certain and mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running on fumes. I was running on freedom, and I wasn't slowing down. The next morning, I woke up in a quiet hotel room 2 towns over. A soft gray light filtered through the heavy curtains, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of obligation the moment I opened my eyes. No urgent calls, no guilt-laden voicemails waiting to pounce. Just silence. Peace. I stretched out lazily, letting myself enjoy the sensation. It was strange, honestly, how heavy freedom could feel at first, like I had been carrying so much for so long that my body didn't know how to set it down completely. But it was getting lighter by the minute. I could feel it. When I finally checked my phone, it was predictably a mess. 78 missed calls. A ridiculous number of texts. The family group chat, usually filled with vacation photos and passive-aggressive comments about politics, was practically melting down. I didn't open any of it yet. I wasn't ready to let their voices back into my head. Not today. Instead, I ordered room service, a ridiculous, overpriced breakfast I never would have let myself splurge on before. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, a giant coffee. When the knock finally came, I practically threw the door open with a grin and tipped the poor guy like a drunk lottery winner. He looked startled but pleased. I didn't care. Let the world be confused by my happiness. I had earned it. I spent the morning planning. There was still work to do if I wanted this break to be permanent. Loose ends to tie up, accounts to close, new ones to open. I needed to transfer everything out of the old family shared financial services and into ones they couldn't even sniff at. New phone plan. New address. New emergency contacts. No more mom listed as a backup. No more dad having access to anything just in case. I needed a clean slate. And I was getting it. Around noon, after polishing off the last of my coffee, I finally gave myself permission to read through some of the messages. I wasn't doing it out of guilt. I wanted to see how bad it had gotten. And frankly, I was curious how creative they were getting. I wasn't disappointed. My mom had sent a long string of messages, each one escalating a little more. First came the guilt. Please, Evan, this isn't you. You're better than this. Come home, and we can talk about it. Then the gaslighting. You're remembering things wrong. Josh always looked up to you. You're just being sensitive. Then the blame. You're tearing this family apart. Over what? Money? Pride? We raised you better than this. And finally, the desperation. If you don't come back and fix this, Josh will lose everything. Do you want that on your conscience? Josh himself had sent shorter, angrier texts. More raw. Less manipulative. You're a selfish piece of garbage. After everything we did for you? Hope you enjoy Thanksgiving alone, loser. You think you're better than us? You're nothing without us. I actually laughed at that one. A short, disbelieving laugh that startled even me. If anything, it proved just how right I had been to leave. If he still thought I was nothing, then why were they all falling apart without me? I didn't respond. Not a word. Instead, I drafted a final message. Short. Final. Unmistakable. This number will be disconnected by the end of the day. I have removed myself from all financial ties and responsibilities to the family. Do not contact me again. Any attempts to harass, threaten, or guilt trip me will be forwarded to my attorney. Goodbye. I sent it to the family group chat. Then, without waiting to see the fallout, I turned off the phone, pulled out the SIM card, and snapped it cleanly in half. It felt good. Like finishing a long, brutal chapter in a book you never really wanted to be part of. I spent the next few weeks building my new life piece by piece. It wasn't glamorous. I slept in cheap hotels, sent out job applications, made 100 little calls, and filled out endless forms. I cut every old tie with a surgeon's precision, canceled my parents' access to my medical records, deleted them from my emergency contacts, froze my credit for a month just to be safe in case Josh got any bright ideas. And slowly, the noise died down. The frantic calls and emails slowed, then stopped. No one showed up banging on my door. They didn't know where to find me. I was a ghost in their lives now. A ghost that took all the scaffolding with him when he disappeared. One cold, bright morning in December, I sat at a little cafe in a new city hundreds of miles away, signing the lease on a small but beautiful apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No co-signers. No secret debts lurking beneath the surface. Just me, standing on my own 2 feet. The landlord slid the keys across the table with a grin. "Welcome home," he said. I took the keys, feeling the cool metal against my palm, and for the first time in a long, long time, I truly believed it. Months later, I heard through a distant cousin, one of the few who had never treated me like a second-class citizen, what had happened after I left. Josh's truck had indeed been repossessed. He tried to make a scene at the dealership, screaming about loyalty and betrayal, but it hadn't changed anything. The apartment complex had evicted him within a month. He tried crashing at my parents' house, but tensions exploded almost immediately. Turns out, when Josh wasn't cushioned by endless second chances and silent sacrifices, he wasn't so charming anymore. The business folded, unsurprisingly. Creditors swooped in like vultures, seizing everything. I heard rumors of screaming matches, of Josh blaming my parents blaming each other, ugly fights that shattered the perfect family image they had clung to so tightly. Last I heard, Josh was living in a tiny apartment in a sketchy part of town, working a dead-end job he hated. My parents had started quietly selling off assets to cover some of the debts, the boat they loved to brag about, Dad's classic car, the vacation fund Mom had been hoarding for a trip to Italy. Gone. Their golden boy had fallen. And without me there to pick up the pieces, they all went down with him. I didn't celebrate it. Not really. It was just justice. The natural consequence of a system built on using someone until there was nothing left. As for me, I found a new job, a good one, in a field I loved. I made friends who valued me for my mind, my heart, not my bank account. I traveled when I wanted to, learned to cook ridiculously complicated recipes just because it made me happy, started taking long walks at sunset with no one demanding I be anywhere or do anything. And every Thanksgiving, when the world buzzes with talk of family dinners and obligations, I sit by my little fireplace with a full heart, smiling softly to myself. Not because I lost my family, but because I finally found me. And this time, no one would take that away. Not ever again.